All right, so we're back to talk about multiplying by powers of 10. So let's say we start out with a number 3. We can represent that with 3 units. Okay, think of the little orange cubes, our unit cubes. So 3 of those. Now, what happens if I want to multiply it by 10? So let's think about with our multiplication definition, this means 3 groups, each of which has 10 items in it. So we can go this way if we want, but each of these now is a group of 10. There's one group of 10, here's another group of 10, and one more. Okay, so instead of having 3 single things now, I have 3 groups of 10. Each of those unit cubes became a rod, right? So if we're going to kind of rewrite in green here what we really have 3 rods that equaled 30. Okay, we're just going to look at a couple examples. Then we're going to pull together what we're doing here. Let's say I have 24. So again, I could say that's 2 rods and 4 units. Well, if I multiply this by 10, okay, we could think of it as 24 groups of 10. Each of these would become a group of 10, and each of these in here, because I have 24 individual units, right, each of those becomes a group of 10. Or we could think about it as the 4 ones each become a group of 10. And then, so again, these each go from a unit to a group of 10, or one of our orange rods. And then, same thing happens here. Our 2 tens each become a group of 10. Right? I have 10 rods here. So if I kind of want to regroup it a little bit, right, each of these becomes a flat, a rod, so I have 4 rods. Each of these 10 tens is 100, so I have 2 of the flats now. Okay, so this obviously equals 240. Okay, now let's think about what really happens here, okay, because the tendency is to kind of fall into using a shortcut, which I am guilty of doing too in class sometimes, and saying, well, if we start with a whole number and multiply by 10, we just add a 0 at the end, right? 24 times 10, you just add a 0. Okay, but that's really kind of sloppy. And even I've been trying to get away from that also. Or the other thing to think about is, let's say I have 3.1, okay? And again, when we did decimals, we said that we could use those cubes, so we could use the single for the 1 here and 3 rods here. If I multiply this by 10, again, kind of jumping ahead from what we had over there, each of these is going to become a flat, that is going to become a rod, so these rods are representing the 1's place here, this is representing the 10's place, the units are representing the 10th's place. Well, I have no 10th place, so this becomes 31. Okay, so here we're not adding a 0, but the temptation again is to talk about moving the decimal over. Which again, I'm guilty of doing that in my class, or when we're talking about scientific notation, talking about how many places you move the decimal, okay? But what I want us to think about today is that that's not exactly accurate, right? What's happening is not that the decimals move, the decimal point moves, or not that we're just adding a 0. So let's think about how this works. So I have 3 in my 1's place, okay? When I multiply it by 10, I don't add a 0 here. That wouldn't make any sense. What do I really do? Well, my 1's gets 10 times bigger, so now my 3 is in the 10's place. I don't have any 1's, so now I put a 0 there. Okay, so I didn't just slap a 0 on the end. What happens is that everything moves up a place value because it multiplies by 10. Same thing here. Here are 1's, 10's, 100's, right? So I start out with 24. Well, 4 got multiplied by 10. Now there are 40 of them. So that's going to move up here. The 2 gets moved up here. So now I have a 2 in the 100's, a 4 in the 10's. I have no 1's. Again, I'm not just slapping a 0 at the end. I mean, visually, yes, that's what it looks like. But we want to think about what's happening, right? Everything's moving up one place value. Over here, same idea. My decimal point is not moving anywhere, okay? So instead of picturing the decimal point moving, let's picture the numbers shoving over. So if I have, let's put it down here. Here are my ones. Here's my decimal point. So here are my tenths. And on this side of my ones are my tens. So originally I have 3.1. Again, everything gets multiplied by 10, so it moves over like this. In this case, I don't need to put a 0 there because I have my decimal point. It's a whole number. So, I mean, visually teaching this, and what I may end up starting to do with my other classes where I go over or teach scientific notation also, is to think about, having cards or something that you can move along to show that it's the numbers that are moving, not the decimal point, okay? And if we take it a step further and think about other powers of 10, it's the same idea, just magnified a little bit more. So if I have 3 times 100 now, okay, visually, I have my 3. Now I'm going to multiply by 100. Don't worry, I'm not going to write out 100 dots. But basically here I have 100 dots there, 100 dots there, 100 dots there. Each of these, if I'm thinking about my orange cubes, rods, flats, each of these now becomes a flat. So we can see that it's going to be 300, okay? Again, though, often when we think about I multiply by 100, I add 2 zeros. I multiply by, this is 10 to the second, right? So that's how many zeros I add. I multiply by 10 to the fifth, or 100,000, I'm going to add 5 zeros. But again, it's not that I'm adding 5 zeros, it's that the numbers are moving 5 places over, because every place value is another power of 10. So I have my 3 here. If I multiplied by 10, I get to here. If I multiply by 10 again, so 10 times 10 is 100, that's when I get to here. I add zeros because there's nothing there as a placeholder otherwise, right? I can't just say, well, this 3 means 300 because it's obviously in the 100 spot, right? We have to fill those in. So think about that as you are teaching this and working with students with this, okay? Think about, it's one thing to have sort of shortcuts, and that's okay. I mean, if I'm multiplying 8 times, 400, I'm going to think about the zeros as a shortcut, but it's different to have it as a shortcut and understand what's happening than to just have it like a memorization, add 2 zeros, right? So make sure your students understand with this why everything gets bumped over. Okay, so that was what we did on Monday. So now you are caught up if you weren't there, or you kind of got a refresher if you were. There is a homework assignment linked on Blackboard for this week. It is in Google Forms, which people thought was pretty easy. The one drawback is that once you get into it, you can't get out of it and go back in. So if that's an issue, just let me know and I can reopen it or something. You might be able to go in and look at it and not submit and then kind of see what you have to do. But we'll figure that out so it's the best for you, okay? So anyway, as always, ask me if you have any questions. I do have office hours Friday on Zoom from 10 to 11, or at any point, just email me and we can figure out another time if that doesn't work for you. Okay, I will talk to you guys later.